Hi, you've reached the Signal Watch, movies, television, comics, and more. I'm your host, Ryan Steens. Join me and our cadre of co-contributors as we examine cultural artifacts of the 20th century, boldly explore the 21st, and try to put it all in perspective. Stay tuned. We're gonna try to make this work.
This is it, sports fans, participants even. Television's greatest array of stars, Laugh Olympics, presents the round-the-world triple team competition between the Yogi Yahooies, the Scooby-Doobies, and the really rottens. The players are on the field, in the stadium even, so let's get on with it. Laugh Olympics.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Signal Watch. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Steens, and with me today is...
Jamie Steens.
Whoa, you're up really loud. So we're trying a new audio setup today, and so we're going to sound maybe a little different. We're trying a few things a little bit different, so bear with us as we ride the new mixer and soundboard. Before, we were always just using a Snowball Blue mic we just set on a table. If you ever wondered why the audio was so bad on this podcast, that would be why.
Well, also Zoom in the past 2 years.
Right, the past 2 years have been Zoom. But now, thanks to a few holidays worth of gift giving and me splurging on a mixer, we're in this like weird world of looking like a semi-professional setup.
Looking like a professional setup.
Yeah, we're trying to make this work. And I keep needing to like turn down things and whatnot. So I'm going to try and balance this a little bit in the after mix, but we'll see what ends up happening. So, this podcast has been brought to you by South Coast Media for all your South Coast media needs. If you need media in the South Coast of the United States, they're your people. So, all right, Jamie, you have been watching the Winter Olympics since when?
Oh boy, since I was a child, but I couldn't tell you when exactly. My mother has always watched them. I remember very fondly watching Winter Olympics with her. My love for the Olympics was sealed in 1988 because we got to go to the Winter Olympics. My aunt and uncle on my mom's side and their son, my cousin, lived in Calgary at the time. And if you know your Olympics, you'll know that the 88 Winter Olympics were held in Calgary. So we went and stayed with them for a week. Pulled us out of school. Not sure how that worked. Can't remember. But yeah, it was amazing. I'm trying to remember the events we went to. We went to a hockey match. I know my brother and dad turned around right after we walked out of the hockey match and tried to scalp tickets off of someone else. So they went back and watched another game because they enjoyed it so much. We tried to go to a skiing event. It took place in Banff, which is about an hour west of Calgary, I think. Don't quote me on that. It could be closer. But it's up in the mountains. But we went up and we were on the side of the ski slope, and the event got canceled because the wind was too bad that day. So we never got to watch that event, but I remember my cousin and my brother and myself, along with all of the other children that were there, just finding random pieces of cardboard and just sliding along the sides of the hill. So that was fun. We went to a lot of skating, is another thing that I remember. We saw both pairs events. We managed to get tickets to the front row of the men's short event. So I got to see Brian Boitano up close and personal. The Battle of the Bryans was that year. The long program, we were also there when he won his gold medal, but we were at the very top of the arena. So, he was a lot smaller. And then also just walking around the Olympic Village was so neat and so much fun. There was this enormous food tent with food from everywhere in the world that we went to a lot because, where else are you going to go? And then the other thing that I remember about that was the pin trading. There were, and I think they still do this, probably not at this Olympics, because of quarantine. There are not that many people there. They try to discourage people from mingling. But it was a big thing, and my brother was really into it. But you could exchange these little pins, and they were Coca-Cola pins. They were like all these, I think, brands. But they were, I don't know, he had collected, by the time we left, like 12 or 15 of these little pens that were, very specific Olympic little pens. And anyway, I thought that was neat because you got to meet so many people doing that and talk to so many people from all around the world. So yeah, it was, I think, what the Olympics are supposed to be about. I don't know if they're like that anymore. But anyway, that is my Olympic experience. Since then, I have stayed pretty much following figure skating mainly. But in general, I do like watching Olympics. Winter Olympics, very specifically because they aren't events that you see very often. A lot of the summer things you see regularly, track and field, running, what else? Baseball, just a lot of things that are very common. And also, like, the sports are very easy to understand. It's basically just you're going downhill at a very fast speed, and whoever gets there first wins. Or you're skating, and whoever gets there first wins. It's really easy to get into it. Not a lot of explanation needed. And also, they're highly dangerous. Like, you have to just admire the audacity of someone who just decides, I am going to strap on a pair of skis and fly down the hill at like 80 miles an hour and go like a football field and a half and maybe not land on your feet.
Yeah. Don't slap the table.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, whenever you do that, there's like a thunder.
I understand. I just didn't realize I was doing that.
Yeah. I started watching the Winter Olympics in little bits and pieces. To be honest, were we not together, I don't know how much I would pay that much attention to the Winter Olympics. I'm a Texas kid. None of the sports mean anything to me. I certainly got a bad taste in my mouth for figure skating. Because when I first started watching it, because of the scoring mechanism, and I was like, well, this isn't really a sport. This is people rating art as it's happening,
right? And
that seems corrupt to me.
And it was,
as it turned out. Yeah, everything that I thought was possibly wrong with this was 100% wrong with it. But the other big thing was, the Summer Olympics happened in the summer when I wasn't in school.
Right.
Winter Olympics went during the school year, and growing up, my parents had a very strict, no TV during the week rule. I could occasionally pop in and catch some race or whatever, but I didn't know what anything was. I wasn't interested. I remember watching a hockey game, probably from the '88 Olympics. It would have been the '88 Olympics, when I was at Lone Star Cafe with the football team, or basketball team. It would have been the basketball team that time of year. But I basically did not understand what was going on. I wasn't really that invested. But that said, listeners, Jamie and I have been together a very, very long time. And so right from the get-go...
26 and a half years.
Yeah, so right from the get-go, I was kind of told, we're watching the Olympics. I was like, all right. And so my love language is saying, yes, I will sit and watch figure skating with you.
And he does. And he's not even, like, passive about it. He makes comments, and they're not...
Well, after 26 years, I have opinions.
Yeah.
And I don't remember everybody and everyone's routine the way you do.
Sure.
You know, I think the Olympics are... I know the ratings are really down this year, and we'll get into that and kind of what I think is going on with why that would be, or you might have opinions as well on that. But I think... It's not, as you said, it's really accessible. Like, you turn on the luge and you watch these people, like, wearing nothing but a unitard and a helmet, jumping on a sled, or the skeleton. The
skeleton is way worse because it's head first, and they're on, like, a bath mat on some skis.
Yeah. And saying, like, okay, you know, in some ways it's both great that it gets down to parts of a second. In some ways it makes for a terrible sport that it gets down to parts of a second.
Yeah.
Because... at that point, you're like, what are we really measuring anymore?
Yeah, someone moved their toe an inch.
Yeah. Or
and that made
did
all
the
the
clock
difference.
Actually start at the right time for this person? I mean, there's a million things that, you know, they have to be super careful. And of course, you know, there's the constant problem as we're dealing with at this point with the doping in sport. And it's something that some countries are still really enthusiastic about doing. And I know that it's, everyone dopes, and it's just whether or not they're actually testing for that and blah, blah, blah. And are the people doping staying ahead of it? And it sucks. It sucks to know that that's part of it. But I do think at the end of the day, I do really enjoy it. I don't know that this Olympics this time is the best Winter Olympics that I've seen.
It might be the worst Olympics I've seen.
Yeah.
I mean, part of it is the pandemic. There's not a crowd there, so your crowd noise is way down. It's just weird to see everyone walking around in masks and interviewing in masks, and it makes a difference. You don't get to see their expressions. You don't get to see them hugging each other as much, and it just... yeah, it's a little sad, and you know that they're separated from their families. Their families can't be there.
Yeah.
So that makes
all it takes is for like NBC to show them their families, and they all burst into tears.
Yeah. But I mean, part of it is the fact that they're in China, and that is a fact that NBC has not ignored.
Yeah, it's been fascinating. If you didn't watch the opening ceremony, in general, I used to find the opening ceremonies incredibly painful. And that had most to do with, like, I can't remember who the guy was, but it would always be Katie Couric. And she would not shut up over the entire thing. It was like she thought we were all there to hear Katie Couric talk.
Well, she would just, explain to us what was happening, like interpret this art that they were doing. And it was, like, basic stuff.
Yeah.
Like, we have eyes.
Yeah. This flag represents their country. Yeah, it was really dumb. And she then, of course, went to CBS, so she hasn't been doing it in several years. And social media has had an impact. Like, they shut up now. People, I think they finally heard back from people, like, because we're all captured. We were a captured audience. Captive audience. That's what I was looking for before, when there was no feedback to the network. Because if you wanted to see the sports, you had to watch whatever they put out there, no matter how they presented it. And I think the NBC presentation was very bad when we were in the 90s. Mm-hmm. And I know that sounds kind of crazy to say, like, the ratings are way down now, and I have opinions about that, but...
Well, there's also a lot more for people to be watching.
Yes. Full stop. I mean... That's when they're like, why aren't people watching? I'm like, because they can watch 100 people do the luge in a row.
Yeah.
Or they can watch Jack Reacher, like, crack some skulls over on, Amazon.
Plus, in 94 or whenever it was, I mean, you had the whole, like, Nancy Kerrigan and Tanya Harding thing.
Yeah.
I mean, it was in the media for weeks leading up to, well, I think it happened 2 months maybe before the Olympics. I can't remember the timeline. But people were watching because of that.
Yeah. It was kind of an interesting period just because at that point, I think the public was pretty aware of figure skating for whatever reason. I think, there were only three or four networks.
Yeah, but Americans had a lot of success at that time.
Yeah.
In figure skating, we've gotten eclipsed by a lot of different countries for various reasons. One, we can't get our jumps up there where they need to be. It's just...
Our drugs aren't the good ones.
Our drugs are not the good ones. Also, there has to be something in our training. You have to start training how to jump like that from really, really early, and I don't think a lot of Americans who get into the sport do it at age 3.
Yeah.
Like Nathan Chen, he started skating at age 3.
Mm-hmm.
So he has the quads.
Yeah.
And he got into it at an age where that's what people were doing. Like they were just starting to do quads when he started jumping like that. When he started competing at an adult level.
Yeah. The Nancy Kerrigan, Tanya Harding thing was its own media circus. It's really indicative of the way the media worked in kind of the 90s when geopolitically things were kind of boring and stable. Our federal government
I miss those days.
Yeah, it was kind of boring and stable. And the news at that time would just go to town on anything they could where there was like a pretty girl in danger or who had disappeared or whatever. And this was like, high school drama blown up to like, epic proportions as far as they were concerned.
Oh, yeah.
And, I think that was part of it, but I think that happened kind of at the top of the crest of skating kind of anyway. At the time, I was not following skating. I knew I don't know what years they were following and getting slotted into, but I certainly remember knowing who like Christy Yamaguchi was.
Christy Yamaguchi was 92.
Yeah. I remember Kwan. I remember...
before 1992... the Olympics were every 4 years, and they were both summer and winter in the same year.
Yeah.
92 was the last year that happened, and then they decided to stagger them every 2 years. So there was a Winter Olympics in 92 and one also in 94.
Yeah. And I remember that because I remember being like, oh my God, they're only gonna do it in like 6 years. That's crazy. And then they're like, no, settle down, America. Like we're going to deliver. We want the money. We're going to do this in 2 years again. And that gave, kind of a story for a lot of people who might have aged out or whatever to continue on and stay with their sports, which was also interesting.
That's what Brian Boitano did. I think I know he was there in 92. He may have also been in 94. I can't remember. But I can't remember. I know there are people that, you're right, would have not come back for another one that came back for 94, but I couldn't tell you names right now.
Yeah. And I remember watching parts of the 92 Olympics. My mother is from the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and that used to be one of the big Winter Olympics training grounds. There's still like facilities up there around like the Marquette area. She's from a small town called Agony that's about 15 miles or something like that from Marquette, 10 miles.
We would see a ski jump in the summer.
Yeah. And that's where she used to go watch it. And that's, in fact, when Anatomy of a Murder was filming in that area, she went to the ski jump and saw Jimmy Stewart and Lee Remick watching the ski jump. So she was watching the people watching the ski jump, but she went to the ski jumps all the time. So growing up, when the Winter Olympics were on, especially Saturday, Sunday, that's what my mom would have on. And then I remember when speed skating kind of became a thing, and that's been one of the other things, has been they've added all of these sports over the years. And when it started in 1926, it was kind of like, what did Gunter and, Sven
leisure sports.
Yeah. And I think, there's a huge legacy and a huge, I think, frankly, problem with the Olympics of the kinds of sports that they end up picking and kind of the maintaining the interest of most people. Because you can't ever, no one has a school program for the skeleton, right? There's never an opportunity unless you're already wealthy or happen to live on the side of a mountain to learn any of these sports. So
it's extremely expensive, and you have to be in a certain location, really.
Yeah. Or be someone who has, a really faulty, risk-reward balance in your head, who's I'm going to give up living here in South Houston and I'm going to go. And that's the crazy thing is you do have all these people from like Texas now who are in the Winter Olympics, which didn't used to be true. But they decided at some point they were going to go, be a luge person, and they're like from Florida or something. And you're like, how the hell did that ever even cross your mind?
Or you can be like the Jamaican bobsledders and train on ground.
Yeah. Who are back for the first time since the Cool Runnings team.
I don't know the specifics of their training this time around. They may have come to a track here. Yeah. That's entirely possible.
I think their pilot lives in the States. When we were interviewing her accent was not...
She sounded American, yeah.
But yeah, it's... so I think there's a lot of, kind of issues as far as, accessibility of the sports. And the era of us, now having the internet and streaming and, a million things to distract us. And it's kind of like when they're complaining now about like, oh, people aren't watching the Oscars. I'm like, yeah, because it's more fun to watch people bitch about it on Twitter. Like, why would I ever watch the thing when it's like, Joe Blow 69 is like way funnier about all of this than, me actually sitting for 4 hours and watching people get through the, the Oscars. And but I have seen no chatter on Twitter except for by the athletes and official channels about the games.
Yeah, or ex-Olympians that, are on Twitter that they're talking about it. Ashley Wagner, Adam Rippon, those sorts of people. Speaking of Twitter, this is something that Ryan and I have talked about a lot. So, ice skating used to be called by Scott Hamilton and I forgot her name is Sandra something. Anyway.
Sandra Butts.
Ryan.
I don't know.
Apologies to Sandra, what's her name?
Butts.
But they were extremely obnoxious.
Yeah.
And I remember this from when I was a kid, not enjoying it. One, Scott Hamilton just lost his mind at everything he saw, which is fine. You like enthusiasm. But if someone fell on a jump, it would be just the end of the world. It's like, oh, you really missed that one. Oh, he blew it. That sort of thing. It just, you're trying to watch a program that has music to it, and you're trying to get involved, and this is all you're hearing in your ear. So, in, I think 2014 is the first time that Johnny and Tara came along to do the smaller venues.
You might want to say their actual full names.
Sorry. Tara Lipinski and Johnny Weir, who are ex-Olympians. Mm-hmm. They are figure skaters. Tara won the gold in 1998.
Yeah.
And Johnny has not won a medal, but I think he won in the national championship once. And
he won our hearts.
He won our hearts. And he's been to the Olympics twice, I think. So they know what they're talking about, but they came in to do like late night stuff, and Twitter went nuts. And everyone said, can these people please take over for Scott Hamilton? And NBC listened.
Yeah.
And the next time, I believe at the World Championships that year, they brought them on with Terry Gann, who's their third, to call the game the championship. Are you laughing at me?
I mean, the idea of it being a game, yeah.
It's a game. And everyone loved it. Mm-hmm. They've been doing it ever since. And they're very cute about it. Tara and Johnny are very good friends. They coordinate their outfits before they go. They're on Twitter all the time interacting with people and their fans and stuff. And there are people, everyone has, complaints. It's Twitter. I've seen lots of people complain about them now because it has been almost 10 years since Scott Hamilton has been on.
Yeah.
They complain that Tara talks too much.
She does not.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm just saying everyone has their own opinions. But it's gotten so much better. And they're so much better about explaining why people are getting scores. Another thing that has changed in figure skating, we talked about this earlier about the scoring system. When we were growing up, it was a lot less transparent why people were getting the scores they were getting. They would just get oh, they got a 10 for artistry and they got a 9.5 for technical ability. Now they go and they show you in a little box in the corner every time they do a jump, like what the base value is and what like the grade of execution is and what the highest score is currently, and so you can judge it against that score, and it's a lot easier to tally in your head like, okay, this is why they're getting these points. And they do it for like spins, for step sequences, for everything.
Baseball fans are going to get some really bad ideas watching it. Like, oh, we could be grading pitches.
Yeah. Well, and why this came about, the change came about, there was, I can't remember when the scandal was, but it was,
I think it was when we were in Phoenix.
It might have been when we were in Phoenix. Yeah, you're right. But there was some Russian or French skater,
a whole bunch of them,
something. But yeah, they got caught throwing basically scores,
which was obvious, by the way, if you actually ever looked at the scores.
Yeah. So now there's a lot more accountability because they have to just chart what they're giving to what jumps and what. Yeah.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. I keep accidentally tapping the table because I'm getting carried away, and Ryan's like, stop doing that.
Yeah, that's why you keep hearing the little metally sound, is that it goes from the table up into another table we have on top of it and through the mechanical
I need
arms
to duct tape my hands together.
Yeah. Well, we can put some rubber under this thing next time or something.
We don't have to.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was a huge, for me, the how clear it was that I mean, I think overall, figure skating was an exemplar of how kind of weird the Winter Olympics actually were. As I said kind of earlier, like it feels as much as you can kind of point to things in the Summer Games like dressage or certain other sports and say the only people who can do this are incredibly wealthy people.
Yeah,
there's a level in figure skating where it's very obvious that minimum you are upper middle class, or you have a lot of, because you have to travel all over the place on your own penny or dime. Sorry, I don't want to do my metaphors incorrectly. And it's there's a certain look, and that was the whole thing with Tonya Harding before the whole kneecapping scandal. Was she was kind of this redneck who didn't, dress correctly. She played the wrong music.
I think her mom made her costumes or something.
Yeah. And they had coaches, and that's essentially what they paid for. Mm-hmm. And everything else was kind of out of their own pocket, including when she kind of left home and then she was, scraping pennies to do everything she was doing. And, so that a lot of the Tonya Harding story in the past 20 years has really gotten reframed around like, well, who was she actually when all of the stuff happened, kind of separate of, her ex deciding he was going to help out. But it's just obvious when you're watching the game that there's also this idea of what is right and what is wrong artistically, and which I think is really straying from a mainstream audience's sensibility. And it gets even harder now that they have to do specific jumps. So I don't know where the happy medium is. I think
that's always been the question with figure skating.
And they also, there's a lack of creativity within it that basically I think boils down to, why do I keep hearing the same 4 frickin' songs over and over and over? Like, one of the best things I think, I saw in this Olympics was like Nathan Chen using like Elton John. Mm-hmm. And there's always been a tendency when people did that to be like, I'm going to dress like the singer. If I'm doing something to Elvis, I'm going to wear an Elvis outfit. And it was always like, this is Ice Capades now. Like, there's a happy medium. And all he did was wear, I was like, that's kind of a cool shirt he wore I thought that was his practice shirt.
Yeah,
and then it was like, oh, that's because it's a Rocket Man routine. Okay.
That's what he does. He doesn't wear like all the sparkly unitards. Like, that is his style. He wears like the fitted shirts and pants.
Yeah, but I mean, it's a really tough thing, because I think like, what kind of people have the money to decide, I'm going to go be a half-pipe snowboarder? I'm going to, like, in that crucial part of your youth where you're basically needing to go to college, finish high school well so you can go to college or do whatever you're going to do for a career, to get started. These people are like doing what everybody else does, maybe for 2 or 3 weekends a year for fun. They're turning into a lifestyle. That's incredibly expensive to do. And so it's either you have money or you get sponsors or blah, 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 or you have a family that is just so kind of wackadoodle that they're like, yeah, man, snowboard for life. You know, I don't know how you end up pulling these things together to even be, you know, kind of at this Olympic level. They was, oh, it's the athleticism. I'm like, man, I know they mentioned like the family support and whatever, but there's a whole lot that goes into these sports that if you're living in Norway is less of a deal, right?
Right.
In Norway, you're
you
near
walk
a mountain.
out your backyard and there's the ski jump.
Yeah.
I mean, Nathan Chen's talked about it this week about how he got into ice skating when he was 3 years old because the Salt Lake City games he was born and raised in Salt Lake City, and so he went to the rink there. There's footage of him as 3 years old. He's adorable skating on that ice rink. But they didn't have the money for a coach, and all the good coaches were in LA, which was the closest place that they could go. His mother drove him back and forth to LA to have a good coach. And it wasn't it wasn't like every week, but, you know, maybe once a month or something. I mean, so he could go get good pointers, and she would write everything down. And then she would try to remember that when they went home to practice. And at some point, he just moved to LA.
Right, which is also...
when he became an adult.
Yeah.
But that's commitment.
Yeah.
And that's not something everyone can do.
Yeah, and I'm not saying the Olympics should be something everybody can do, but I do think it's part of what creates a barrier between, you know, people's understanding of a sport or an appreciation of it, and then to watch figure skating for women has turned into a thing that has apparently dovetailed into you need to weigh 86 pounds and be 15 years old and have the specific center of gravity to be able to do this thing no one's ever been able to do before, because that's what we give points for. So it's a bunch of freaking mutant children running around out there who are potentially also drugged up.
The Russians have a women's figure skating factory, and it is composed of children. And they hit their peak at 15 years old. And after that, you don't see them anymore.
Yeah, well, it's like our women's gymnastics for the most part.
For the most part, yes. This Olympics, their star figure skater is currently under investigation for doping.
Yeah.
And nothing will happen to her.
And if you're not keeping up with this, the Russians are currently not operating under the actual flag of Russia. It's a bunch of it's a loose band of misfits from Russia called the Russian Olympic Committee, and it is clearly all exactly the same organization. It just has a different name, so they can't say, but
punishment is not a punishment. It's super lame.
The IOC is terrified.
They need to have been banned from the Olympics for at least one cycle.
Yeah. So this kind of half measure has done nothing, and now I've heard it go back and forth already 3 times on what's going to happen with this girl.
Nothing will happen with her. She's underage. So nothing can't happen to her.
Well, I mean, to her, but they should be able to say you can't have a medal or participate now that we've discovered doping. Yeah. Are they saying that?
I don't think that anything will happen. That they've gotten their lawyers involved, and I don't think anything will happen.
And it makes the sport look like a fraud.
Yes.
At that point.
Yeah.
And the Olympics themselves.
Mm-hmm. But again, this is in the middle of the Olympics. We don't know what's going to happen. Yeah. I'm just speculating.
But, yeah, at the same time, I mean, it's the fact that you can manipulate the outcome of a sport by both first doping and then throwing attorneys at it doesn't make anybody look good. You know, it's bad enough when we have to go to the instant replay and, you know, because Joe West is a terrible umpire. But, you know, it's it should never be that is a problem. It gets down to the same thing of, I know when I see the person cross the line during speed skating by putting their toe out, they were the first person.
Yeah.
And if someone get caught, you know, doing something, they'd be bounced, because no 15-year-old's winning a race.
Right.
In speed skating.
Yeah.
You can't apply attorneys till you win. And it's shameful. And I know that there's propaganda going both ways, but at the end of the day, it's real bad. And I think it's one of the things that the International Olympic Committee is so kind of like the FIFA guys is so ingrained, and now the NFL and MLB guys are so ingrained in like maintaining their power and never giving an inch because they're afraid if they ever give an inch, they're going to look weak or something. But they just absolutely refuse to change on anything. And, you hear crazy things out of the International Olympic Committee of like, oh, women can't do luge. They have small brains, It's, and, I mean, women's luge is a fairly recent sport because of shit like that. And I'm like, it just seems to be this rolling body of old men who have horrible decision-making abilities, aren't thinking about what would actually be interesting. NBC themselves, we talked about kind of the bad job that you thought Scott Hamilton and Deborah Butts were doing.
Sandra, I don't know what's her name. Okay,
you should have brought your laptop.
I know.
And I hated them when we were listening.
Yeah,
and
they were obnoxious.
And now the coverage, it's slightly. I mean, I do think Johnny and Tara are like the best of the group that they've got, and I think Terry really helps with all that. But I also think that when you kind of go sport to sport, there's so much stuff that's like kind of inside baseball that it's like two people who are experts in the sport who forget often to like dumb it down for people.
Yeah.
And they talk about like, oh, when I go to Burgers with, Steve the skier, and it's like, y'all's world is too small. Like, there's no separation of...
You're now talking to about 10 people.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're probably there.
Yeah. But it's a crazy... I mean, all these sports you start to realize are like they're crazy niche sports to begin with. And it's of course the ratings aren't going to be super great. And the thing that's sad is, like, if you watch the slalom or you watch like the Super G for downhill skiing, it is fascinating stuff. But it also, NBC then is like, oh, you like that? Here's 2 hours of it.
Yeah.
Of this people you don't know doing the same stuff over and I don't know how you fix that. I flat out do not know.
I don't either. I will say it's something that I like having on when I'm like on my computer. Mm-hmm. I can just kind of glance up and watch someone just fly off a hill, and I'm like, oh, that's cool, and not have to pay too much attention.
What's her name too? Who does the sideline, not the sideline stuff, but like the
Andrea Joyce.
Yeah, you can tell like they've put a box around her now. Because she used to just suck. She
used to be awful.
Yeah. She would ask the stupidest, like, dummy questions to people when they...
Well, she would also ask the really mean questions. Yeah. Like, why did you mess up? I mean, not literally, but...
Sometimes she'd be like, what happened there when you fell over?
What happened out there? Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, well, they fell over. Have you ever never done a sport?
Well, that used to be a lot more prevalent in general in sports journalism. I mean... They would come immediately after just having a crushing defeat, and they would or they would win a silver medal, and they would still say, "What happened?"
Yeah, that was a big one.
That was the worst. They've backed way off from that.
Yeah.
Now they're very much, oh, you won a bronze medal, congratulations.
Which it should be. Yes. You're the third best person on the planet at this thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Our dog has just woken up, and he would like to insert his opinion. Yeah,
he's wandered over to the microphones, so you may hear some Andre action happening. But yeah, I think all of that has really improved, and so it's kind of a shame that as it's kind of going on this slant towards like them figuring stuff out, and then we watched this Kevin Hart thing on Peacock today. And they were like inserting like here, because one of the things people say during the Summer Olympics is they should show someone off the street trying to do these sports, so we have a baseline. And so they're showing Joel McHale just trying to figure out how to skate.
Yeah.
And I was
like, curling too.
Yeah. And I was like, that's actually a really smart thing to do. Like show, because when you're watching it, you're like, how hard can curling be? It's all these, person after person is doing it, and it's like marginally better than that guy or that lady.
I mean, now you can't do like someone trying to do the half pipe.
Could.
or skeleton or something, but they would die.
Well, and I keep asking during this Olympics is like, how do you figure out you're good at skeleton without dying?
So Ryan and I have had this game that we played recently, and it is one, if you had to do an Olympic event, what do you think you would possibly be the best at?
Yeah.
And two, what do you think you would have the least chance of dying doing?
Yeah.
And I mean, I think the obvious answer is curling for the what would you not die doing.
Sure.
But I don't know what I'd be best at. I don't know. What would your answer be?
I think I could do the Super G.
Well, Interesting.
So, again, I'm from Texas, but I also was not one of the families that was like, oh, it's spring break, we're going to Breckenridge, ha, ha, ha.
I'm going to Vail.
Yeah, that was not us. My mom worked, and I sat at home playing with my G.I. Joes. So, it was straight through high school. But no, seriously, the only time I've ever gone on a pair of skis in my life was my grandfather had hand-carved some that were sitting in his garage, and in high school, we were in Michigan and for Christmas, and it was snowing, and Jason's like, whew. So we stood on the hill in my grandfather's backyard with leather straps over my shoes and skis.
How'd that go?
It went poorly. There was about 30 feet of going downhill and then me just tumping over.
Well, it sounds pretty safe though.
No, it was totally safe. But yeah, I'm not comfortable with any of it. I whenever there's any precipitation and it's below 32 here, I just stay in the house because that's, I think, my best bet. But yeah, like I'll watch hockey. I kind of understand hockey.
Oh, hockey! I think I wouldn't die doing.
I would want to be not the goalie, but I want to be a defense person in hockey.
Sure.
Whatever that is called in hockey.
But like, I'm just the amount of padding that you have on yourself. Now, having said that, our women's team lost one of the best players badly, and I don't even remember what happened to her, but in one of the first games this year, but they had to cart her off on a stretcher.
Yeah, she didn't just like pull a hammy.
No.
It was bad.
Something bad happened. So, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's all dangerous.
And that's kind of the thing when you're watching all these sports. It's like you're watching figure skating, not a pad on these people.
No.
And when they fall over, they're falling onto ice.
Yeah.
And
they fall hard.
Yeah. It hurts. Mm-hmm. I don't know how they're not all covered in, maybe they have body makeup on. I don't know. But yeah, they've got to be completely covered in bruises all the time.
One would think.
Yeah. Because they fall all the time and they're like routines.
I mean, especially the women. They're wearing tights.
Yeah.
Or, yeah, something. Leggings, whatever.
Yeah. Yoga pants.
Right.
But yeah, it's, I do think it's worth checking out. I am, if you haven't been watching the Olympics.
Yeah, there's a week left.
Yeah. And, checking in on kind of, how the coverage actually is, because Peacock, are we paying for Peacock right now?
I think so, but it's like $4 a month.
Yeah.
I like watching Amber Ruffin, and you should watch it too.
Right. She's on Peacock.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's very available on there, and the coverage is kind of interesting because some of the things they show, there's just no commentators for. They're just sending you the raw footage. Yeah,
because it's like complete coverage.
Right.
What Peacock has.
So, I do recommend that. And, if the announcers are bothering you or whatever, just...
Oh, if the announcers are bothering you, Peacock does not have announcers.
Right. But if you're watching NBC, I think the sports that are coming up next week, I think there's some really cool stuff they've been doing where I was so skeptical when they first announced all this stuff of like snowboarding on like a speed course like down the side of a mountain. It's the coolest sport.
It's so neat. It's like racing.
Yeah. And there's, other things. The half pipe is definitely interesting. I like the half pipe.
I think they're done with it, though.
They're totally done.
Yeah. And Chloe Kim won again, so she's got her second gold medal.
But yeah, there's plenty of stuff to still check out, and I think there's going to be some more speed skating stuff, which I always like because it's my favorite part of the Summer Olympics is the track and field, and it's kind of the closest they have in these games. So anyway, I don't really have a ton else to say about kind of what's going on with the Olympics, but we this is really kind of an excuse for me to do a few things. One, try out the new audio setup.
We have used it before, but it got erased.
It got erased when we did our Thor Ragnarok podcast.
Yeah.
And then also...
it was the Eternals.
Oh, it was the Eternals. We erased the Thor Ragnarok one, too.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's also an opportunity for us to break out a little bit from our usual format and try something else. I'm going to be thinking about other things we can do that are not just talking about movies here at the Signal Watch. So we say we do other things. We should probably do that from time to time. So, and this one is, we're going to try and dump while the Olympics are still going, so you have an opportunity to listen to it and maybe get excited about them. Although all we did was sit here and go, this sucks, that sucks for the last half hour. But I genuinely think it's like a cool thing. I will say, before we go, the opening ceremonies blew this year.
They were real bad. And part of it may have been because there was no audience, but
no,
it was
had
just
nothing. It
bad.
was, they kept playing, like, your favorite 10 classical hits.
Oh, the
over
music.
and over.
The music was awful. Like the parade of athletes or whatever they call it when they all enter. It was just like, what was it? The Lone Ranger, the Nutcracker. What was another song?
1812 Overture.
Yeah. It was just like over and over and over. And it was just like, what is this?
Yeah. All I can think is they're like, what are songs that Westerners will respond to?
But I would have loved to just hear some traditional Chinese music.
Apparently that
would
was
have been great.
Not what they were doing. And then their whole thing was, they turned the whole floor of the stadium into a television. And so then they just showed you a television.
Which I'm sure that looks amazing when you're there, but on TV, it just looks like
you're watching someone else's TV.
You're watching CG.
Yeah.
I mean, I know it's not, but I mean, it is.
It is.
It's exactly what it is. Yeah.
So I think there was we're still figuring out how to do an Olympic ceremony that's not like 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, right? Yeah. They're all bad, but there are different levels of bad. And anyway, every Olympics every 2 years, I tell everyone, nope, not this Friday. I gotta watch the opening ceremony, even though I don't particularly like it, but it's all part of it.
I have one more story, and I don't know how to shove it in here naturally, so I forgot to talk about. Yes, I'm going to talk about my trip to the Olympics again. But my aunt...
Check your privilege, Jamie.
I know. Hey, we stayed at their house. It's not like we were... Anyway, yes, it probably cost some money. But from their house, you could, in the distance, see the ski jump. And so my uncle had a really nice telescope, and you could sit at their back window and kind of see the ski jumpers. And it was kind of amazing. And that was the year that Eddie the Eagle was there.
Was it really?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which they just made they made a movie about it
about 3 years ago.
3 years ago that we just watched last year, which is really good. It's really cute. And if you don't know who Eddie the Eagle is, Google him because he's amazing.
Yeah.
But anyway, that was pretty cool.
Yeah. Anyway, thanks for listening in. And, Jamie, would you like to take us out with the Olympic theme?
Dun 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 dun.
Boom boom.
I'm way up key.
It was beautiful to me.
Oh, God.
Happy Olympics, everybody.
Happy Olympics.
that about wraps it up for this edition of The Signal Watch, a production of the League of Melbotus. Thanks for sticking with us. If you enjoyed the podcast, we invite you to drop on by the Signal Watch blog, where you'll find write-ups of a wide variety of movies and more. We'd love to hear from you, so find us online and let us know what you think. Whether you prefer email, blog comments, or social media, we'll be happy to hear from you. We'll be back soon with more exceedingly high-quality content. So, until next time, God damn it, babies, you've got to be kind.